President Biden went to Walter Reed Medical Center for his annual physical. Doctors said Biden was fit as a fiddle, in that he's old-timey and held together by strings.
Ah, yes. Maybe as old as a Stradivarius, but he doesn't play like one, does he? Have you seen his schedule for the week? He went to Camp David on Friday, so Friday night, and then Saturday and Sunday, Camp David. Today, he's at Camp David. Does he come back tomorrow? I think he comes back tomorrow from Camp David. And he has a meeting with a couple of people that nobody's ever heard of on a committee of some kind at the White House. And he does have the State of the Onion this week, the State of the Union. And I think it's the latest in the year that any president has ever given a State of the Union. He wanted to wait until after Super Tuesday because, you know, he's got a lot of stuff to lie about. They'll give him new lies. Maybe he'll have some kind of fake thing to say about peace in the Middle East. Donald Trump had 3 peace agreements between Israel and Arab nations in the Middle East, but pay no attention to that. I've got just a bucket full of stuff thanks to the Democrats today. Remarkable stuff, eh? A hilarious Washington Post typist, a leftist who's not very masculine, and his piece is he's very excited that he owned a gun. See, he's excited that he owns a gun, but when he had a home intruder, he had an intruder, somebody intrude into his home, that is to say, and he said, "I'm glad I had a gun. I'm even happier that I didn't use it on an intruder." So on an intruder, you had an intruder in your home, and you have a gun, and you, but it's the, this is a guy I think who's probably passed up a lot of golden opportunities in life, don't you think? I think probably he could have done a service to mankind there that prevented follow-on crimes. He could have been a crime fighter, but instead he's a typist for the DNC at the Washington Post. He's a sad shadow of a man, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that in a little bit. We got a lot of stuff because, there was a weekend and everything, so several days since we last convened, and they always give us lots of stuff. Now, among other things, we have we're expecting the Supreme Court to come down with their decision while we're on the air. In fact, in about an hour, we should have the Supreme Court decision. The United States Supreme Court, not the Colorado Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court is supposed to be rendering a verdict today. And everybody's guessing the Supreme Court likes to be very mysterious, except when that Democrat leftist rich girl leaked the Roe versus Wade decision, leading to attempted murder of Brett Kavanaugh and 2 other Supreme Court justices and all kinds of mayhem and riots. They really love death. They're like Hamas. They like Hamas. They're in bed with Hamas, too. They're quite remarkable. But I'll get to that later, because there's Hamas news today. But the Supreme Court at 10 a.m. expected to, according to the reading of the tea leaves, to render their verdict on Colorado Democrats all taking Donald Trump off of the ballot in the state of Colorado. And Illinois and Maine have done the same thing. And as goes Colorado, so goes Illinois and Maine. When it comes to stripping President Trump's name off the ballot. Now, I did my best. Girl and I, we went and voted in the Washington, D.C. primary on Saturday at the Madison Hotel on 15th Street here in Washington, D.C. Went down to fill in my President Trump thing. Are you supposed to take pictures of your ballot after you fill out the ballot? I'm not sure if you are, but I took a picture of my ballot. That means the FBI will be breaking down my door in the middle of the night, I think, with a CNN camera crew and Beck. But never mind that. Nikki Haley won the D.C. primary very handily, but that's because, it's Washington, D.C., and it's a different kind of place. And I think I'll get into that a bit. Also, Nikki Haley on the television said she was being asked by a Democrat front person, well, you've made a pledge to support whoever the Republican nominee is after Donald Trump wins the nomination. Will you still make good on that promise? And she said no. And everybody's misinterpreting what she said, but the first word she said was no, and then she babbled a little bit. But we'll get into that. We have that audio for you as well. Kamala Harris, she was out and about, believe it or not, and she was reading from a script when she said she's calling for a ceasefire. A ceasefire. And all the little SEALs, they clapped, the dim-witted Democrats that went to see a Kamala Harris speech. Could you imagine taking time out of your busy day to go see a Kamala Harris speech? Hey, Kamala speaking down at the YMCA. Let's go see Kamala. I bet she'll have some inspiring messages for all of us. So Kamala, ceasefire, but just for 6 weeks. I love this whole 6 weeks thing. And Israel stepped up and said, no, I don't think so. Say, here's the deal. And I've got a great, now former spokesman for the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, on this. And he echoed what I have been saying for, I think, months now. And wait till you hear what the now former spokesman for the Israeli Defense Force had to say about this ceasefire idea. They probably came up with it on their own, but it's what he said is exactly what I've been saying for weeks now, and we'll get to that as well. Oh, speaking of which, a Muslim man named Mohammed murdered a Jewish dentist in California, murdered him dead, and the news media could care less because, it wasn't a white guy wearing a MAGA hat who committed a racist murder. It's a guy named Mohammed murdering a Jewish dentist in California, and that makes it okay. That's not news. See, it's news, not news. Why is that, Michael? Because that's dog bites man. Muslim kills Jew, even though it's here in the United States. The Democrat Party, and in this case, I'm talking about the news media, they don't care about that story because they're not on the side of civilization. They're the left. And nobody murders more people than the left. Right? Oh, speaking of which, there's an almost funny crime story on the front page of the Washington Post today. It is outcry elicits new approach to crime. That's the front page above the fold in the Washington Post. Legislation marks a turn away from progressive strategies by D.C. Council. The progressive strategies led to rocketing coffin sales. They love. I think that they might be heavily invested in caskets and coffin makers because they're Democrats. But now, hey, wait a minute. We changed the laws and defunded the police and reduced the number of police and demonized the police. And now a whole bunch of people have been murdered and people have been looted blind and robbed and going out of business. And there's anarchy in the streets of Washington and people don't want to come here anymore. Maybe we should take a look at our progressive approach to crime. You think? So we'll get to that. Also, the front page of the Washington Post. Taliban, the Taliban in Afghanistan. Taliban envisions Afghanistan as cricket power. Cricket, it's a little like baseball, but it's English. And the Washington Post has a front page story with a color picture, and it takes up a huge amount of space on the front page of the paper, below the fold, but on the front page of the A sectional. And Taliban envisions Afghanistan as cricket power. They're playing up the Taliban on the front page of the Washington Post as friends you can get along with because the left is insane, and the left has taken over the Democrat Party, and that means the vast majority of the news media, too. Also, their lead story, front page above the fold, upper right-hand corner. Limits on aid starve Gazans. Limits on aid starve Gazans is the headline. Man-made hunger crisis in enclave. It's an enclave, kind of like Bel Air in Los Angeles. That's an enclave, too. And the Gaza, which is more than twice the size of Washington, D.C., and has more than 25 miles of Mediterranean seafront property, that's an enclave, too. Occupied by bloodthirsty savages from a medieval hell that slithered out of cracks in the earth to torture and rape and murder. U.S. food airdrops, sign of growing rift with Israel. The Democrats have a rift with Israel because they are our allies, and the jihadis are much closer on the political spectrum to the Democrat Party today. They're closer to the mullahs, the ayatollahs in Iran, than they are to John F. Kennedy, even to Bill Clinton on the political spectrum, because the Democrat Party is a radicalized organization, and they're crazy. I think that's generous. Amazing stuff. And this is, and also not on the front page, The Gazans that ran people over with trucks and murdered how many? Tens of people, dozens of people. Murdered them so they could steal the aid that was being delivered because they're murderous savages. And the Democrats want to have sex with them, don't they, Michael? They want to date them. They want the terrorists of Hamas to date their daughters. Please come to Washington, date my daughter. This is the Democrat Party's thing. They don't even want them to shave or bathe or anything. Just date my daughter. So we got that going. Crazy stuff. So many on the Democratic Socialists of America, a major power in the Democrat Party. Bernie Sanders is one. There's some of the squad members are communists too. This is the Communist Party in the United States. They came up with a softer label because the manipulation of the language is very, very important to these people. Democratic Socialists of America pushing Democrats to vote uncommitted. If you don't vote uncommitted, then you'll be committed in a mental institution when the Democrat Party takes over. It's a remarkable thing. Also, crazy news out of New York. And tomorrow is Super Tuesday, of course, and that is one of the reasons that the Supreme Court decision today is a big deal. No doubt about it. A crazy story out of New York. There have been more people murdered on the New York City subway system since the beginning of 2020. We're just at the beginning of 2024, so we had 2020, 21, 22, 23. More people murdered since the beginning of 2020 than there were murdered on the New York City subway system in the 15 years preceding 2020. And that's because Joe Biden and Democrats are here, and that means more murder. Like Laken Riley, 22-year-old nursing student in Georgia that was brutally murdered, had her head smashed in till it wasn't shaped like a head anymore by an illegal alien. By the way, the illegal alien from Venezuela, there's a Venezuelan crime wave that Joe Biden and the Democrat Party invited into this country. They waved him in. They gave him Venezuelan gift baskets. They gave him, his brother, the murderer's brother, I'm going to declare him guilty, just like Colorado declared President Trump to be guilty of insurrection, even though he was never charged with insurrection, was never tried on the charge of insurrection because he was never charged with it, and was never convicted of insurrection. But the Democrats on the state Supreme Court there said, what the hell, we're just going to declare him guilty anyway. Well, Joe Biden is guilty of being an accessory to the murder of a 22-year-old nursing student named Laken Riley. I think that seems only fair, and every state attorney general and every district attorney in the country should charge Joe Biden as an accessory to whatever crime is committed in their jurisdiction by an illegal alien that Joe Biden rolled in to the country. I think that's a good idea. Also, the now just fairly recently retired head of the Border Patrol, Raul Ortiz, was on 60 Minutes, of all places, where he said that even though he's the head of Border Patrol and been going through this crisis, he never spoke to the President of the United States, and he never spoke to Kamala Harris, who is our border czar. I like to say czarina because I believe that she has female parts, so she should be a czarina. Speaking of female parts, the Democrats also have this lieutenant colonel who's in the Space Force, who's a man pretending to be a woman and giving a speech because the future of Space Force is transgender, the Democrats like to say. Pretty amazing stuff we've got going there. Jill Biden was heckled by a pro-Hamas terrorist lover. We've got that for you because they're all nuts. Alejandro Mayorkas, he's a nitwit and a dimwit, and he should be impeached and probably handcuffed and put in leg shackles too, as they are so fond of doing to so many people. The leg shackles, they like the leg shackles. So we've got a few things for you there. And there's more, but the biggie is the Supreme Court, really, which we're expecting at least. I can't predict the future very often, sometimes, with perfect clarity. But we're expecting, according to all the frauds at the New York Times, and they like to get leaks from left-wing clerks that work for Sonia Sotomayor. Have you ever noticed the similarity? It's striking between Sonia Sotomayor and Jake LaMotta late in his career. Spitting image, I'm telling you. talking about a spitting image. So we got that. And we are at 888-630-9625. Supreme Court and everything else. Stay right there. Hey, it's Chris Plant. Excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. All right, let us, before we get into all the crazy the Democrats have provided us for today, let's go to a telephone call. A lot going on. We got the Supreme Court today. Got State of the Union this week. Crime and mayhem everywhere, and they're telling us that crime has never been lower, and the economy's never been better. Let's go to the telephones. Let's go to, because they lie all the time, let's go to Patricia, calling from Washington, D.C. Patricia, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Well, I have two scenarios I think might happen on the State of the Union.
Uh-huh.
Either Biden is at the Capitol, speaks for 15 minutes with notes, and then leaves, because he's only barely has 15 minutes. Or for the last week, they've been working on a spiced together 1 hour that they'll say live from the White House instead, and and pretend it's live.
Oh, that is
interesting. I don't think he can do it.
That is interesting. They say, oh, well, they'll claim weather, global warming, maybe climate change will prevent them from driving the 2 miles to the Capitol and not even 2 miles. And they'll say, well, he's going to do it from the White House. And then they'll have, everything he does, Patricia, these days is they release videos and they're edited every second and a half because he can't complete a sentence or a thought. It sounds like you have little faith in our government as truth.
Oh, absolutely.
As truth tellers. Why?
Oh, I gave up on. I've been studying the Democrats for 30 years. I gave up on them 20 years ago, for good.
Yeah.
And they are bat, crazy now.
Yeah.
But thanks for letting me talk.
You bet. Did you start out a Democrat?
I worked for them.
Uh-huh.
And unions for 20 years, and they were crazy, and I woke up finally. Thank heavens.
Well, very good. Look, you're not alone. I, too, came from such a background. Ronald Reagan himself came from such a background, just like yours, working for the Democrats and being a Democrat and working for the unions, right? He was the head of the Screen Actors Guild, the president of the Screen Actors Guild. So Ronald Reagan's background is very much like your background or vice versa.
Well, I've followed you for years, so I know your history, too. And at least we woke up. No one can get us now, either. I mean, we won't change.
That's a fact. We got it figured out. We cracked the code. Patricia, thank you very kindly. Joe Biden, hey, will they fake the State of the Union? Change it up because Joe can't do it? The Democrats are out there again treating all black Americans like they're Leon Spinks. I'm sorry, like they're who? A Richard Pryor reference. It's a classic moment in Richard Pryor's comedic history. But I want to get to that. The Democrats, we had Merrick Garland, our chief law enforcement officer in the United States, going on and on about how not having, mail-out ballots and drop boxes is racist, because that makes sense to racists like Merrick Garland, and that black people can't be expected to have a driver's license or a photo ID of any kind, because I guess he thinks all black people live in cardboard boxes under bridges, stealing stuff out of cars. That's Merrick Garland and the racist Democrats, the party of slavery, just to name one of their many accomplishments. So we got that. But before we get to that, and then they're the biggest racists in the conversation, but it's all about stealing votes, let's be honest. Oh, you got to have mail-out ballots, otherwise it's racist. Oh, sure. Got to have ballot boxes being stuffed in the middle of the night by people wearing surgical gloves with boxes and boxes full of ballots. Otherwise, you're a racist. And if you think that in order to register to vote, I went voted, my best girl and I, we went and voted in the primary I mentioned, on Saturday. And when you get there, you show an ID. Yeah, I know. I felt like I was being racially discriminated against, and then I remembered that I'm white, so I was born with a driver's license. Get a birth certificate and a driver's license the moment you're born as a white person. That's what you call white privilege. That's pretty amazing stuff. Get your driver's license. Or a photo ID of some kind. I got a friend in D.C. who's a full-grown adult, and he votes Republican for sure. And he doesn't drive. He hasn't driven forever. But he has a photo ID because, he's not thoroughly impaired. He just doesn't drive. He's not a driving person. Most people do drive, but not everyone. And my friend Pat, he no drive. He's a no drive. So I think it's like an eyesight thing. It's a vision thing. But never mind that. There's a lot to get to. I'm not sure if you've been following this situation in the Middle East, but a gang of jihadis attacked Israel and murdered more than 1,200 people, and they took hundreds of people hostage, and they raped and mutilated and dismembered and murdered hostages, and the Democrats applaud that. The Democrat Party has applauded that. They're on the side of the hostage-taking genital mutilators, the rapists, and they don't have much to say about that at all. They just want those Jews to stop defending themselves because, I don't know, I keep thinking of Adolf Hitler and his Socialist Workers' Party. And then, of course, the Democratic Socialists of America over the weekend demanding that Democrat voters just vote uncommitted in the primaries, which is fine with me. But this is lots of amazing stuff. California dentist gunned down. All right, and turns out this is the news media is saying that the murderer, the dentist, is a Jewish man. The murderer is a Muslim man whose name is coincidentally Mohammed. It's a very popular name. I don't know if you've noticed that. Whereas I'm named Christopher, but we're not doing as many decapitations. Oh, speaking of which, yeah, the fun front page story on the Washington Post that the Taliban envisions Afghanistan as a cricket power. And there's a picture of them here out in the field. I just spoke last week and the week before about how the Taliban has brought back stadium executions where they bring in crowds of thousands of people. Crowd much bigger than the cricket match here, I've got to say, the photograph of the cricket match, a smattering of people standing around watching. They're hoping that maybe later there'll be a decapitation. But the Taliban, which is being praised by the Washington Post today as crackerjack cricket players, they brought back stadium public executions. It's a tradition that they've had for a long time. And I wonder if during their cricket matches, maybe, do they have halftime at cricket or anything like that? Seventh inning stretch, something good like that, where they could decapitate some infidels or alleged homosexuals, something like that. And the Washington Post is singing the praises of the Taliban. They did not have a front page story on the executions coming back in stadiums, or stadia, if you prefer. But let's get back to California. California dentist gunned down in pre-planned attack by, quote, disgruntled and, quote, ex-patient. He's an ex-patient who sparked a 5-hour manhunt. Sure. Amazing stuff. A dentist was shot and killed in his California office on Thursday by a disgruntled former patient who planned out the slaying weeks in advance, according to the police. Mohammed Abdul Karim, 29 years old, allegedly stormed into Smile Plus Dentistry and Orthodontics, wearing all black clothing around 4:15 p.m., opened fire, striking 2 adult men and 1 adult woman. The gunman then hopped into a U-Haul pickup truck. Is that like an advertisement for them? Or U-Haul pickup truck with Arizona plates and fled the scene. The El Cajon Police Department said, El Cajon, California. And first responders arrived within just 2 minutes. That's pretty good. In Washington, D.C., it's usually like 45 minutes to an hour. But one of the men died at the scene. The others were rushed to the hospital in serious condition. Now, This is pretty crazy stuff. The police didn't name the victims, but the deceased, the dentist, was named by Yeshiva World as Dr. Benjamin Yarhuni. And he was killed by Mohammed. And that, if it were just change one factor, is a MAGA hat. Just put a MAGA hat into the story, and then it's a big story, right? Because Democrats and the news media. So this happened, and on Thursday, Jewish dentists, Muslim assailant, shows up, murders the dentist, shoots more than one person, flees in a I like the detail of the U-Haul truck. Very good stuff. And the Anti-Defamation League of San Diego said Friday the victim of the shooting was a member of the Jewish community, said police. They're still wondering, was this caused by anti-Semitism? Hard to say. I don't know. There's a lot of it out there these days. I don't know if you've picked up on that. Maybe the news media should zero in on that. Maybe you should look at his social media before we leap to conclusions like this. But let's go to Kamala, because Kamala was giving a speech, which she probably shouldn't do because she's not very good at any of this stuff. But she, the ABC News people are very excited to type up the story on behalf of their party, the Democrat Party, and their candidate, Joe Biden, and his running mate, Kamala Harris. Immense scale of suffering is the ABC fake news headline, in quotation marks. In Gaza, demands temporary ceasefire. Temporary. Why would, if there is immense scale of suffering, why would you want a temporary ceasefire? And who's calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine, with Ukraine and Russia? And how about Sudan, with the war going on there, where they're capturing people and casting them into slavery? Anybody calling for a ceasefire there? No. So why just the Gaza? What's up with that? You've got a genocidal band of blood-drenched lunatics called Hamas being funded by Iran, and Iran being funded by the United States and Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Who is the lead terrorist here? The Al Capone of the operation is actually Joe Biden. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke on Sunday afternoon in Selma, Alabama, naturally Selma, Alabama, to mark the 59th anniversary of a milestone moment in the civil rights movement, Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday. They had one of those in Ireland, too. That was it's a song, too. You might be familiar with the song. At the top of her remarks, however, Harris addressed something else. She called on the Israelis to, in her words, do more for the people of Gaza who are dying of malnutrition and dehydration. Well, they probably shouldn't have murdered the people that are responsible for their food and water. Every day is an IQ test, and Hamas fails the IQ test every single day. Let's go to Kamala in Selma, Alabama, because she's there. It's Bloody Sunday, where Democrats, and they were all Democrats, Sheriff Bull Connor, the governor, George Wallace, all elected Democrats. Bull Connor, Sheriff Bull Connor with the fire hoses and the attack dogs, was a statewide leader of the Democrat Party, an elected Democrat sheriff, and statewide, he led the party on a walkout at one of their national political conventions. And I think he's still a Democrat in good standing. They lie about everything. But here's Kamala Harris yesterday in Selma, Alabama.
I will repeat, the threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated.
Eliminated. That's what they're doing.
Given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Which is what is currently on the table.
That's currently on the table. That's for at least the next 6 weeks. And then we'll resume hostilities. Is this the plan? After 6 weeks, then we'll get back to the killing. Because, the U.S. is funding both sides of this, of course. Everybody knows that. Just amazing. Why would you have a ceasefire for 6 weeks? How does that make any sense at all? The correct answer is it doesn't make any sense at all. An Israeli official, speaking to Ynet, said Hamas refuses to provide clear answers, and therefore there is no reason to dispatch the Israeli delegation to the alleged peace talks going on in Cairo, Egypt right now. Israel is now boycotting the ceasefire talks in Cairo because Hamas refuses to release the names of the hostages that they haven't murdered yet. And Israel has said, give us a list of the names of the hostages. And Hamas says, we'll kill you. That's what they say. I'm quoting them now. It's like, what's the ventriloquist? Ahmed the terrorist. We'll kill you. We'll kill you. Said, well, give us a list of the names of the hostages that you haven't murdered yet. And they just say that they'll kill you. And then they move on. And the Israeli official, not named, Hamas refuses to provide clear answers, and therefore there is no reason to dispatch the Israeli delegation to Egypt. And Joe Biden, he's pressuring the Israelis, not Hamas, right, to stop going after the terrorists, the genocidal terrorists that Joe Biden is funding. He's the benevolent sponsor of Iran with billions and billions of dollars. And then Iran transfers that money to Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. And they're waging war against civilization. And Joe Biden helped because, he is a moron. Now let's go to the now former Israeli Defense Force spokesman, Jonathan Conricus. I'm going with Conricus, Conricus. Jonathan Conricus was on the television early this morning, and I was watching For You. And he proposed something that I have been proposing for certainly weeks and perhaps months, and it's pretty straightforward. Here's how you end this. Israel, obviously a vastly superior military power. Even though the savage, suicidal death cult, the genocidal death cult known as Hamas, they're willing to die on the spot just to kill one more Jewish baby. The solution is this: the unconditional surrender of Hamas, the release of all the hostages, and turn over the leaders of Hamas to face justice. Then we can have a ceasefire. Here is former IDF spokesman Jonathan Conricus.
The war could end very quickly, and as the vice president says, ceasefire can and is within reach. If Hamas surrenders, if they turn over the hostages unconditionally, and if the Hamas coward leaders emerge from underground, under their hiding underneath Israeli civilians, the war would end, I think, very quickly because Israelis want to get on with living.
Right, that's right. And Hamas wants to get on with killing, not living, but killing. And dying is one of their short-term goals, too. And that's where, we should be as helpful as we can. Dr. Jill Biden, who's not a doctor at all, was giving a fake speech. And why? There's an interesting story about her today, that she's the one behind Joe Biden running for a second term because she is drunk with power. But here is Dr. Jill Biden giving a bad speech when a Democrat woman stood up and started screaming that she loves terrorism.
Jill, when are you and America going to call for a ceasefire?
Listen to the mob that is the Democrat Party. A grown man jumped up and brutalized the young woman. He was just somebody in the audience. And he violently grabbed the protester woman. They hate the Jews. They're really not on our side. They are not on our side at all. Amazing stuff. I wonder if they'd protest the Transgender Space Force Lieutenant Colonel. The Democrat Party is very unwell. Amazing stuff. Yeah, Dr. Jill giving a speech when a young woman stood up and started screaming, ceasefire now, ceasefire. What about Ukraine? Ceasefire in Ukraine? How about Sudan? Or do you just support the genocidal anti-Semites of Hamas being funded by Iran, being funded by Joe Biden? Yeah, two Palestinian you should see this man in the crowd jumped up and grabbed this young woman and brutalized her. I think the police should look into him. He should probably be charged. He should be in leg shackles. If he has a wife or a daughter, the police should intervene because this guy was a bad guy. She was in Tucson, Arizona when this happened. The young woman's just being a Democrat. It's her First Amendment right. Remember, they every now and then, on again, off again, they talk about how it's your First Amendment right. But if you do it at one of their events, then any random man will stand up and beat your brains in because the left is violent. They're more violent than Hamas in the grand scheme of things. We're at 888-630-9625. Senator Tim Kaine is a radical left-wing extremist. A terrorist, I think. Is he a terrorist? Well, he seems like a terrorist. Tim Kaine, is he a fascist? Maybe he's a fascist. Tim Kaine put out a press release. He's being challenged by Hung Cao. Hung Cao is a great American and a Vietnamese refugee who fled communism, came here, went to the Naval Academy, served as a naval officer, explosive ordnance disposal, assigned to SEAL teams and combat zones. And here's what Tim Kaine 2024 press release says. Folks, this is disgusting. What do Donald Trump, Virginia Senate candidate Hung Cao, and actual Nazis have in common? Well, for one thing, they all recently attended CPAC. I attended CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C., and they've got an NBC News headline. Tim Kaine does. Nazis mingle openly at CPAC, spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and finding allies. This is pure propaganda. It's always Democrats showing up, and they get a photo and they post it online, and then a very corrupt media takes it from there. Hung Cao is a great American hero.